coming.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So today we have as our guest
Katarina MacLeod.
And Katarina talks to people about
Prostitution and human trafficking.
Because it's a vital issue we need to be aware of personally and for our family and our friends.
That's right.
And whether you're watching this as a personal issue or as a friend or as a teacher, a neighbor, it's something we really need to look out for each other. So, what got you started on this? Because the purpose of this, before I jump around here, is to help people deal with big stuff. So, resiliency is our theme, and resiliency is dealing with life's adversities. So, what got you going on this theme, this big topic?
I spent 15 years in the sex trade.
Okay.
Before entering the sex trade, I had a lot of sexual abuse, domestic violence. My husband was murdered. And the man who murdered him was a mutual friend and held me hostage for 3 years. And then that's how I ended up in. I went to a women's abuse group for some support, and the lady there recruited me in.
Lovely.
So, and then I ended up there, and that's how I ended up here.
What a journey. What a journey. So, our viewers are in different stages of life,
Right.
and sometimes they're all in Canada for some views, and for some reason, sometimes we get picked up and we're shown in another country.
Awesome.
Oh, absolutely. So, what would you say to people to be aware of? What are some of the warning signs that things are not kosher, not good?
Well, I always tell parents to really monitor their kids. I mean, we live in a super sexualized culture right now, and everything is so accessible to these kids. They have iPhones, iPads, you know, they've got computer internet, they've got all that stuff with pop-ups coming up and porn, and we're finding that a lot of guys are actually luring girls now off of social media. So I tell them, like, watch if your daughter all of a sudden, you know, her behavior changes, or she's coming home with new clothes or jewelry, or she's drug-starved, or she's not going to school. Changes in behavior are huge. If she has an older boyfriend she doesn't want you to meet.
Yes. How older is it?
Well, you know, you can... The problem is this, is that now we're finding that teenagers are pimping out teenagers. So it can be your own classmate. But there are older men who are looking, they're predators, and they're looking for the vulnerable girls that they can just make their victims and lure them out and turn them out.
So, change in hours, change in wardrobe,
Yes.
not wanting to meet the new friend or special friend.
Right. Or they start doing drugs,
Okay.
or depression starts kicking in, or, you know, like I said, all of a sudden they're not going to school, or they become more defiant. You know, these are big red flags. So I tell parents, I don't care how old your kid is, if they're in their house, you need to know what's going on. So know their passwords to their phones, their computers. My kids have to come to me and show me every friend request they get before they're allowed to befriend someone. And what happens is you get these guys who lurk. They are looking for the girls who are like, oh, I hate my life, or my mom and dad make me so mad, or whatever, and they befriend them.
Yes.
And we had an incident where a girl was in that kind of situation, and a guy befriended her, and she started chatting with him. A couple of weeks went by. He invited her out to his place. When she showed up, it was him and his friends. And they drugged her, they raped her, they videotaped it, and then that was their blackmail. So she would go to school in the day, and then at night she'd meet him in a parking lot and be selling herself to guys in cars. And her parents had no clue for 5 years.
Oh, 5 years.
5 years.
Oh, painful.
Right.
So, it's not a topic I know a lot about,
Right.
but I work with youth at risk for other reasons. They're at risk because mom and dad are both dead and they're living with great auntie who's 83. Is one example I'll never forget. It's like, wow, I'm really rich. I had 2 whole parents till I left home. Somewhere around 23, I think there was a hint at 21 that it was almost time to launch.
Right, exactly.
2 more years of school, Dad, honestly, I'm gone. So, we talked to them about boundaries and expectations.
Right.
That it's great to have attention,
Yes.
but what are your boundaries? What are your expectations? What do you do to define yourself?
Right.
And it's really amazing to see some of them. Nobody's ever had that talk with them.
Well, you know, a lot of the girls that, again, I work with, they're coming from broken families. They're looking for a father figure. Their moms have been involved in prostitution, or their fathers are pimps or drug dealers. So that conversation's not happening.
Right.
They're not learning the skills and the self-worth that they need to be taught. We are taught now, I mean, you go everywhere and everything is so sexualized and glamorized and girls are dressed provocative. So our young girls think this is right and this is how they get attention. And our boys are taught that this is the way that women are supposed to look. This is how they're supposed to be. You just look at porn nowadays. It is, there's no soft porn left. It's all hardcore porn where girls are getting, abused. And our little boys are having access to this before they even become sexual. And they're thinking that this is what women like. And if girls are watching it, they're thinking this is what they have to do. So that conversation has to start with the parents. But when you come from brokenness and your parents aren't even on board because the computer is now the babysitter, what do?
Okay. So your experience is even much stronger than mine and deeper than mine, but I was finding that in these classes that I'd only have 20 people in the class, but I had to be very big on expectations, and some of the young ladies in the class took respectful attention as I must want something else.
Right.
And it was like, wow, that was both frightening and new to me. When I first started 20-something years ago doing this self-created job, I wasn't used to somebody that I'd just say hello and good morning and make eye contact.
Right.
And of course, it's good for your ego for a nanosecond when you get a 19-year-old to ask a 40-year-old, you want a date?
Right.
And then I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. When I was 19, I didn't want to date 40-years-olds.
Exactly.
Maybe they had a nice car, had a good vacation experience, but I still didn't want to date.
Right.
Hang out with them over a meal, learn things? Yes.
Of course.
So that was my introduction to there was something wrong.
Well, again, when you come from brokenness, little girls are on that search for that father figure. You want that attention. And you quickly learn in today's society that you can get the attention that you want from men through sexuality.
And that's just one way to get attention, unfortunately.
Right. And there are men who don't have that respect or have that boundary or think, well, she's just a kid, and they take pure advantage of it. And all these girls are looking for is somebody to accept them and to love them.
I remember I got invited, a university professor overseas told his class to do a project on resiliency.
Right.
So they all typed in resiliency, and being good at search engine optimization, I was one of the top 5 sites in the world, so I got 70 odd requests out of 76 students for, tell me about resiliency, and I was like, so I talked to 5 of them, figured out it was all the same 3 classes from the same university, from the same professor,
right.
And I got them to make up a list of questions from each class. Then I told them I would answer each class, but that's only 3 people I'm talking to now, not 70.
Right.
But it was really interesting because these are all people in a professional course. Mm-hmm. Not one of them had gotten that far. I think it was 3rd year in a medical course by being too bent out of shape. But it was amazing to see how some of their friends took it, that this old guy was talking to these 25-year-old medical students. A lot of young ladies, some young men. But along the way I made some good connections, respectful. I've been invited to weddings. It's a little far to travel for people I don't really know. I've seen the wedding pictures, I've seen the honeymoon pictures, some. I've seen the baby shower pictures, it's really cute. That was really wonderful. But it's the cousins and the aunties that feel broken because they're living in poverty. So you get things like, I know I'm really old at 19, but if I'm too old for you to date, I have a 16-year-old sister, and it's like, are they pimping out their own family? If there's nothing to eat in the fridge.
Yes, and it happens. I mean, in those countries it happens. And it's almost expected. If you have a girl, it's like a treasure, right? Whoa, I'm going to have a girl, so I'm going to be able to feed my family and do those kinds of things. And it's sad.
It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but at the same time, when you don't have food on the table and you don't have a place to live and all of those things, we're so lucky here,
If we don't have food in Canada, we have things called the food bank.
Right.
You bring your photo ID, you take the bus, you get your friend to take you on a car, and once a week they're opened, sometimes they're open more than that, and they give you, based on how many people you say you have, enough to get by. It's not awesome, but it's enough to get by.
You're eating.
You're eating.
Right.
So it's pretty amazing.
Right.
But for my friends and acquaintances with relatives who aren't getting that, this was a new type of self-exploitation, if you will, that I was, being naive, unaware of.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've read widely, but it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to have it show up on your home computer in your in basket where you go, oh.
Well, here we're like, you know, obviously I mean, it angers me, these pimps, these traffickers, these girls who think it's okay to go and do this kind of job. But when you're seeing it happen in these third world countries, I get it. I get it. It's heartbreaking and it's horrible. And I mean, sometimes it's just culturally accepted and expected.
$10 for a school uniform in one of the countries I'm talking with about doing a little project work through a volunteer group. And the girls go sell themselves in the market at $2 a trip to get enough money so they go to school. And if they get one uniform between the two of them because their other sister's too young, they go to school every other day.
It's so sad. It's so sad that we live in this kind of a world. You know, it does. It breaks my heart. I mean, my heart is to one day be able to go to these places and go to the red light districts and help any way that I can help.
It's just, so that's why I like to do my resiliency project, because it doesn't help everybody, but the kids in school, in a couple of, they get to use it to be calm, and when you're calmer, you make better decisions.
You do. You do. And if we're teaching our children now, I mean, that's going to help them when they're older, and they're going to make smarter and wiser decisions.
So, we, living in Ontario, Canada, recently had the government introduce more legislation about children and sex education. And some of my friends are just so excited that we're going to have experts that are trained to talk about sexuality, sensuality, my words now, boundaries and expectations, and what's age appropriate. I remember once that a young lady asked me out on a date when I was 17, which was like, wow, this is a switch. Turns out I was her first date in her whole life.
Wow.
She was 17 to 18 and had been, is, I'm still sure, a gifted athlete, had never had a date, decided it was time. I was rather intimidated with her physical skills, and I knew she was a provincial level, national quality athlete, so it was like, I wouldn't ask her out, she probably doesn't even want to talk to me. I'm sure the other nationally ranked male athletes have got her on her I want a date list.
Yeah.
But I was brought up that when you're out to take a young lady on a date, you went arm in arm.
Yeah.
Didn't mean anything else was going to happen, but for my culture and my age back then, that was considered very appropriate. And maybe, if the date went well, you held hands, maybe.
Yeah.
I was 17. It was a long time ago. But that was considered safe and normal. And in fact, I had some young ladies I took out on dates where I didn't get the hand holding, and they're like, you don't want to hold my hand? It's like, first date, kind of rushing this. That's date 3.
It's not like that anymore.
Not now.
No.
It's like football tackle.
Oh, it's insane.
So it's interesting with this new legislation. I think overall, despite the people that are in angst that it's the parents' job to do that, well, if most parents did it well,
it wouldn't have to be done.
Wouldn't have to be done.
Yeah.
But I know for me, growing up, the 2 people that got pregnant before high school, even before they're 13 to 14 years old, were from the strict families with all the rules, and you can't talk to my daughter, and you can't walk my daughter home. Well, it's good to have boundaries. But just like my friends with alcohol, those of us that were allowed little sips, bleh, wine, beer at 6 years old, here's what mommy, daddy, your uncles and aunties are having. Bleh. So at 13, it's like, I'm not in a rush to drink that stuff. Tastes like poison.
And it's true, right? If kids are being told they can't, I mean, kids want to, that's just their nature.
That's like the bullfight red flags of all the kids I know.
You have to be open. You have to understand that your kids are going to do things that maybe you're hoping they don't do. But, you know, I think back to, okay, I mean, I did drugs, I was drinking, I was having sex, and I mean, it was from where I came from. I didn't learn the things that I needed to learn. But there's going to come a time that my kids are going to experiment.
Yes.
And I need to be here, and I need to be open that they know that they can come and talk to me. You know, if my son comes to me and says, Mom, I'm thinking I'm going to have sex, well, I want to equip him. I can't forbid him because he's going to do it whether I like it or not.
With you?
Well,
knowingly or not knowingly?
Right. So I want to make sure that he has protection, that he knows what's going on, that he knows how to treat a woman.
Yes, with respect and dignity.
Exactly.
As my father said, if you treat the right woman well, she might offer you something you're not even quite worthy of quite yet. It's like, geez, Dad, you know, that served me very well.
And it's true. And I tell that to my sons all the time, is women want to be loved and they want to be respected. They're not dogs. They're not objects.
Yep.
You don't own them.
Oh,
You know?
key phrase, you do not own them.
Right.
So you treat them with dignity and respect, no hitting, no shoving, no pinching, no...
Right. I mean, it's the way you want to be treated, you're going to get the same kind back. And so I want my boys to be stand-up men who nurture and who love, whoever they're with, and respect them and treat them like they're princesses, because we're all queens and we're all kings.
Yes, absolutely. Done well, it's mutual respect.
Exactly.
I work with these youth at risk, as I said earlier, but I've also worked with seniors over 88 at a nursing home that's local. Just a couple of times, but it was very interesting to see a 93-year-old who'd been married for 60-odd years, holding hands, pardon me, still courting. Because, with that very old voice of his, she's really important because she is my number one and only one lady. For the first time I laid eyes on her, and I thought, oh, what a love story. 60 plus years of that? What a way to treat each other.
That's beautiful.
He said, didn't meet her till I was in my late 20s. Took 4 years to convince her to go out with me. But he said, it's worth the wait.
And that's what our children need to learn. This is what it's all about. It's about love and nurture. And, it's so Hollywood. Oh, you can just marry and get a divorce. You can just throw away that girl, get another girl.
Trade them in like a used car.
Right. There's no value anymore. And there's no sacredness around sex and love and marriage and all of this stuff. And it breaks my heart. Because I'm not an old girl, but it was different back then. There wasn't everything that there is today. There wasn't the disrespect the way that you see it happening.
I have a high school friend from a long time ago who said, she put her hand on her hip at a school reunion and said, you never asked me on a date back then. Not even dancing or music or concerts. I said, well, I was a little too hormonal for my own good, and as I couldn't find one of you that was interesting, and I found more than one of you interesting, I figured none of you dating was better than all of you. She said, good choice, because we'd have ripped you to pieces.
I see, that's self-control, right?
Yeah, it's self-discipline.
Right, and that doesn't happen.
Because we were in the band together, and there was the trumpet player, and there's the oboe player, and the 3 clarinet. They were all smart and beautiful, and I wanted to start to date them all. I was like, no, I can't make up my mind. So other than the young lady that took me out a couple of times, it was like, no, I think I'm going to go single for a while till I figure this all out.
Right.
Because too many women are too interesting.
Too much trouble?
Well, as my father said, one at a time for a long time is the only way.
Oh, yes.
Thank heavens for having a good role model. But not everybody has a role model. And my mother was a good role model on how to treat a woman and talked to me about what to expect as a woman and why she found my father attractive and how well he treated her and respectful and how he treated her sisters really well.
Right.
And how his brothers stood up for their sister when she was mistreated once, and the man's lucky that he stayed intact.
Yeah.
So there was this, no vigilante justice, just you treat our sister, our mother, and all the women really well, or there'll be consequences. And it will include the police.
And there should be consequences. There should be more consequences for the things that are going on in today's society.
Yes. Well, without mentioning names, because I don't have that permission, I've talked to a couple of families where there's been terrible things happen to a member of the family, and then consequences months or years later. Because depression and suicide after abuse are not uncommon. And it's really sad there's no consequences, because, what's just a little sexting after you abuse somebody sexually? And it's like, oh, Lord, give me strength. If it happens to my daughters, I might cross a line. I don't think I would, but that'd be the one time I would go, he dished it out, so he's going to get some dishing back. So this blame and shame mentality, it's just so easy to be nasty online for even one mistake.
Oh, it's crazy. You see kids sexting each other now and sending pictures back and forth to each other. And there's kids who will use those pictures and if you don't give me your lunch money or your chocolate bar, I'm putting this viral. It's become this power and control thing.
Because electronics means that if it goes electronic, to quote my father, even though he was talking about print media, if it goes there, it can go anywhere.
Exactly. It'll never be gone.
No, it's there forever, the rest of your life and your grandkids' lives.
Exactly.
And it'll still be there in generations.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be the grandpa or the grandfather or the father or the son that my father was very explicit. If it's no good for the front page of the major newspapers, is it any good or worth doing? Geez, Dad, that's a really valid point.
It's a good way to look at it.
Well, sure it was.
Yeah.
And I was well behaved, but I had a tremble around more than one of the young ladies in high school, so I figured I'd just keep that to myself and not...
But it was still control. You still had control.
Absolutely.
Right?
We went to school dances together, in the school, goodbyes at the front door of the school. That was that. So it's an interesting journey you've had,
Right.
and I really respect your courage to share it, because I get people asking me for advice in areas of expertise where I don't have a lot of depth. I just have this general, what I call, I have a workshop called Rights, Roles, and Responsibilities. And I get people to define, what are your rights in life?
Right.
Respect.
Oh.
Before we sat down, I said, should we do this across the table, or is the couch okay?
Right.
Because we all have to feel safe in life.
We do.
And I should never do anything that, to quote my daughter, would creep somebody out.
Right.
And I agree.
Totally.
Because even if it's the ultimate comfort zone for me, it doesn't mean it is for others.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't even understand. I mean, they're always like, oh, you know, I like this, I don't like that. They don't understand that each person is an individual. We all have different desires and different likes and different comfort zones, and people seem to forget that. You know, just because I like it doesn't mean you like it.
I went to an event downtown Toronto a few years ago, and the young lady there had ink. It was world-class ink, and it was her favorite fairy tale. Her dad read her, I believe, if I got the story right, as a child. So it's this beautiful, beautiful, I had never seen artwork in a museum better than this, and it was into the thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And so she was serving drinks, and the one time I was there for this event, upstairs,
Right.
I saw a little hint, a little hint of it under the outside of the sleeve, and I went, oh, you have some ink?
Right.
And she lifted up a little bit, and I went, wow, that's full color, and it's high quality.
Right.
She went, it's an investment. It's a tribute to my favorite story and my favorite reader. Well, months go by, and she sees that I'm respectful, not without being just a little flirty. And I said, I want to see your arm.
Not your arm.
Her arm, yeah, I know. And so she went and changed and put on a short sleeve, and I got to see all of the arm tattoo, which was about Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
And it is breathtaking. She said, I don't think I'll ever get any more ink, but from here to here, it's a tribute to my favorite reader and my favorite story. And it was like, wow. And she said, I don't show it to most people. This is for
personal.
It's just for me.
It's personal.
And of course, I was really swept up that she would do this
Right.
because her dad introduced her to the story, if I remember the story
Right.
correctly. And it was like, wow. And you shared it with me. She said, yes. And I said, can I take a picture of it? Sure. So I can't tell you. I swore to secrecy that who it is.
Right.
But I got 4 pictures of this tattoo that is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. Now, some of my friends think ink is good, and I see you have
I
some.
have a lot. Yeah.
And some of my friends think ink is terrible, and
Right.
I can't judge it. It's
an
not my body.
expression, and it's expression.
Yes,
And,
you know,
I mean,
somewhere we have to take responsibility and say there's something wrong, and start seeing experts.
well, we have to. You know, like growing up in where I grew up and being sexually abused young, and all of my boyfriends being abusive, and a lot of that came from not having proper parenting.
Yes.
You know, my father wasn't around, very unemotional man when he was. But my mother, and when her and my dad divorced, she kind of checked out. And we were, you know, it was me and my siblings, and we were basically fed on our own. We did what we had to do. And there wasn't discipline. She really couldn't control us. You know, we all became defiant. I was on my mission of, you know, I'm going to destroy everything and everybody because of where I came from. So when you see the way that this is happening and what's going on with all these teenagers today, I see so much brokenness.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. And it's horrifying because there is nobody teaching the skills that need to be taught to any of these kids. So I had to learn, as I grew older, you know, I hated my mother. I blamed her for this. You didn't do that. You didn't do this. I wouldn't have got abused if my dad was there. I had to learn at some point that I had to take responsibility because now I was at an age where I couldn't blame them anymore. If I wanted to change, I had to be the one to do the changing.
that's close to an identical conversation I had with a friend who was over 50, and it was still his mother's fault.
Right.
I said, yeah, well, somewhere between 21 and 29, it's no longer your mother's fault. I'm sorry it happened,
Right.
and I'm sorry she was that way,
Right.
and possibly is that way,
Right.
but it's time to say, that was then, this is now.
Definitely.
This is my new normal. My old normal was unpleasant. My new normal is all of my own making, and it's time to take that compartment, you can't erase it,
Right.
and just close the door.
And that's it, you know, and not even that. I think if your parents are not doing the job that they're supposed to do, there's been damage along the way for them too.
Oh,
right?
Parents share what they learned.
Exactly.
They don't do it on purpose if it's bad.
It's generational, right? And I totally believe that. And so I had to come to a point where I had to realize that she was broken and she had a horrible past, you know, and I had to forgive her and I had to move forward in life.
I have, we don't talk often, but I had a friend who, before age 5, there was a death in the house in front of her. Mm-hmm. Well, Children's Aid Society, it's like,
right.
Whew. But her mother wasn't that way on purpose. Her mother grew up with other stuff,
right.
And then addictions kicked in, and things spiraled out of control. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you don't forgive,
right.
It's an awful lot to carry. And that famous comedian from the 80s and 70s said, the trouble with holding a grudge, or more, is while you hold the grudge, the other person's moved on and is out dancing.
And that's the truth.
And it can ruin your whole life if you don't let some of this go, acknowledge it. Right. Doesn't mean you forget it,
right.
But you move ahead, get on with it.
You know, the sad part is I have 4 children, and I have 2 girls and 2 boys. And my second-born daughter, I mean, my oldest kids witnessed everything. You know, drunk mommy, high mommy. You know, I was a prostitute for 15 years. So they were exposed to all of this. They seen the abuse. They watched, you know, I got raped in front of them. I got beat in front of them. It was just insane what they had watched. And I didn't teach them the skills because I didn't have them from my own mother.
Sure.
And it carried on. So now I have a daughter who's prostituting. You know, for her, even though she watched me go through hell, and I got out and she went in, and for the longest time I couldn't figure out, like, what are you doing? You watch me.
Yep.
But children live what they learn.
Word for word. I'm coaching an 8-year-old now, mm-hmm. And they use the same words the daddy used
right.
against the mommy.
Right.
And this 8-year-old's like, it's like, wow.
It's so true.
And the mother's like, and I said, yes, well, you can't talk about anything around her with your ex.
Right.
In front of her, because you're taking your adult problems and making them the kid's problem.
Right.
You have to only have the everyday stuff issues with this child, right. And parenting.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you're giving them a whole lifetime of grief.
Yeah.
It's going to screw up their relationships. It's going to, and the 2 parents are like, because I talk to them separately.
Right.
Oh, it's like, I'm not your marriage counselor, and I'm not a child. I was here to help all 3 of you
right.
deal with the anxiety of the separation.
Right.
So.
And it's that, I mean, parents, now that I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, parents, you don't understand the influence you have on your child. From what your life is, if your life's chaotic and it's crazy and it's abusive, you are totally ruining your kids if they're being exposed to this. You know, I have a daughter now who's 24 years old. Like I said, she's stuck in, she's been in and out, drugs. I mean, it's like watching a mini-me. And she hates me.
Mm-hmm, of course.
It's because of you on there. It's about, you know, she hasn't come to that point where she has to say, okay, mom was messed up, and now I need to take responsibility.
I have a former good friend,
mm-hmm.
And because I went and talked to their parent
right.
and wished them Merry Christmas, I'm no longer allowed to talk to them because my parents were mean to me, nasty to me, and now you can't. I never want to talk to you ever again. It's like, now we're both over 50.
Right.
You left home a long time ago, 40 years ago, and 43 years ago in his case. Mm-hmm. And so just by wishing your parents Merry Christmas and Happy Wedding Anniversary a couple times a year, they were good neighbors to me.
Right.
So it's like, wow, at some point you have to, because he's cut out dozens of us because we still talk to the parents.
Well, you're carrying around, I mean, that's a heavy load to carry.
It is.
You know, you're hating people, you're angry at people, you can't talk to this person, can't talk to that person. I went almost my whole life like that.
It's exhausting.
It is totally exhausting. I have no hatred and no anger towards anybody, even my abusers. None of them. None of them. something happened along the way to make them think it was okay. Period.
And it's not.
No, definitely it's not.
No.
I'm not saying anything that...
Didn't think you were. I just want to make it very clear.
I was not justifying any of their actions. They need help, you know. But at the same time, I can't hold that on me. It's me who's going to suffer. Like you said, well, I'm suffering and they're out dancing.
Yeah, I agree. So, the first time we did this, and I didn't turn the camera on, I'm real smart sometimes, never 100% of the time. We talked about what are the signs parents should look for that their son or daughter, because this works with both genders,
It
so
does.
don't think because they have a nice little boy in the house that he's not being mistreated as well.
Right.
Male or female, because I work with grandparents, I don't know if you know that.
Okay.
And mom and dad are unavailable.
Right.
Prison, death, illness, all the reasons why a parent wouldn't parent a child.
Right.
Lost on the street.
Yeah.
And so, it starts at 9 years old. It's not all about your daughter being 19 and suddenly she's going to be mistreated this way. It's at every age. And a really delicate topic, kids whose sexual preferences are not quite society's norms are more at risk because they're more detached, more vulnerable, more scared.
Right.
So,
I mean, I think...
what are the signs to look for is what I wanted to spit out.
Communication is key. Communication is key. So I'm always telling parents, like, you know, social media plays a huge role in our children. It's teaching our children. It's parenting our children. It's teaching them about sex because people don't want to talk about it.
People are scared of it.
Well, you know, it's a subject that, I mean, it's uncomfortable, right? And it really shouldn't be. It really, really shouldn't be. So you're letting the media teach your kid what sexually is accepted and what's not. And actually, everything is accepted sexually nowadays.
I see Facebook profiles.
Oh.
I get scammers approach me because they're looking for a special friend.
Yes.
And they always look like they're 17 in a day.
Yeah.
And in reality, it could be a creepy man with just a lot of good pictures.
And that's the scary part is, you know, we've had girls who've been recruited from Facebook. You know, we had a girl who, you know, she had both parents, but she didn't get the emotional that she needed from them. You know, they were kind of doing their own thing, living their life. She was going to do her own thing. And so she was, you know, talking to strange guys, and she was befriended by somebody, talked to this guy for a couple of weeks, finally decided to meet with him, and it was him and his buddies, and they raped her and videotaped her. So she was going to school through the day and prostituting for them at night. So what are the signs? Signs are, you know, you watch the behavior change. You know, if all of a sudden your child is becoming distant, depressed, drugs are starting to happen, or they're coming home with new things because of what these guys are doing, and we call it like the Romeo scenario now, is that they are, and it's older men usually, who are taking advantage of these young girls, and these young girls are falling hook, line, and sinker because they've just wanted a daddy. They've just wanted somebody to love them and hold them and tell them they're beautiful, and these guys are doing that. They're manipulating these girls, and these girls are falling so in love with them that they'll do anything to hold on to them.
Yep.
And then they're using that, well, we ran out of money, I've spent everything on you, you know, we could have this great life, all you have to do is just have sex a couple times, and that's how it's beginning. And the scary part is it's not just the vulnerable girls that are getting, you know, lured into this, it's everybody now, because it's the boyfriend scenario.
I had a client whose 13-year-old A++, not a grade under 91%,
Right.
for her whole school experience. And in grade 9, she had a beer. It was really boring from her much older boyfriend.
Right.
I said, no problems. I suspect he watered it down to make it boring because she never had one.
Right.
She had a rum and cola because that's what is really good for you. It was really boring. Again, I suspect he altered it to make it weak and blah.
Right.
So he gave her something else. She was living on the street, hooking for him within less than 90 days. Oh, and pregnant with somebody's kid.
Right.
The sex trade, sexting, hypersexualization, our society has warped things.
Yes.
Definitely to the disadvantage of women.
Definitely.
And it puts people of same-sex or multi-sex choices and all the other terms of the LGBT community at even higher risk.
Yes.
So it's important, if people are going to be resilient, that we pay attention to ourselves and each other.
Yeah.
And whether you're watching this as a parent, a teacher, a kid, we need to pay Pay attention, because sex can be a glorious thing between two consenting adults, keywords adults.
Yes.
In my world, that's somewhere at 19 and older. How boring.
It's true.
But it's about safety and respect and dignity.
It is.
Not for sale.
No, definitely not for sale. We have to teach our kids what the value of our own bodies are. And self-worth. Self-worth is huge. And I see all girls and boys that I've seen who have been prostituted out have never had self-worth.
I said to somebody who was very confused, they confused respect and dignity with I must want more.
Right.
And I said, it's like this. I'm old, you're just getting started.
Right.
In my belief system, that means we can be friends. I can appreciate that you have glorious looks.
Right.
That's a good thing. But that's it.
That's it.
We can be friends.
Yep.
We're going to go for lunch. I've got to ask for lunch and a date, a real date, a man-woman date. I winked at the camera just in case you didn't see that. And it was like, well, for a nanosecond I'm flattered,
Right.
but in my world, 19-year-olds don't date. I was single at the time. At that time, 49 years old.
Well, what do you even have in common?
We breathe.
Right.
2 eyes, 2 ears.
And this is what I tell girls all the time who have these boyfriends who are older. What do you have in common with him? Nothing. It's sex. That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
So that's what I call plumbing.
Right.
So when you get that disparity and there's nothing else, it's plumbing.
Right.
And so plumbing's really interesting. Don't get me wrong. I'm real interested, but that doesn't mean you follow through.
No.
So I want to thank you for your time and your efforts.
Oh, thank you.
And the work you do. Phone number, contact information, because speaking, training, consulting.
Advocating, mentoring. I mentor girls who are coming out.
Media interviews.
Yes.
It's important that we share this because in a world of fear, because nobody wants to talk about sex.
No.
But it's getting in the way of the workplace.
It is.
It's getting in the way of society. The emergency task force, police find it's getting in the way. One of my friends is a firefighter, first responder, and he's had his life threatened because he disrupted an organizational business because there was a fire in the next unit and the smoke was spreading. So they banged down doors because they weren't getting a response.
Right.
And then somebody was making a movie.
Wow.
They think without somebody's permission, somebody was there against their will.
Well, I don't think there's ever permission. It's manipulation that leads you into this world to begin with.
Yeah. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And till next time, imagine yourself with more resiliency for life.